One of the things I've always wanted as a developer of Akka services or Akka apps using the Akka SDK is a way to produce diagrams or design diagrams of the structure of the system or the structure of the app. The reason for this is the way the Akka SDK works. So in this video, I'm going to introduce you to this extension, and we'll go through how to install it and then how you use this. Pretty straightforward, but I think it's pretty useful. Hopefully it'll be useful. So the whole point of this extension is to produce these, what I'm calling component diagrams. So I'll explain what they are, why I think they're useful if you're new to the Akka SDK, and if you are maybe an experienced user of the SDK, you'll hopefully appreciate this. But then we'll go into actually seeing how it's installed and used. So the motivation for this is that with the Akka SDK, there's this really elegant, small, surprisingly small set of components. There's just 6 component types right now. And these components are the fundamental building blocks for creating Akka apps. And I think it's just incredible how powerful these things are for creating fully distributed, fully scalable, multi-region, fault-tolerant types of applications with a elegant, simple set of components. It's just amazing. I think, though, that this is a culmination of years of effort by the Akka team to refine and tweak and develop and iterate to come up with this very refined and powerful set of components. So in this video, I'm not going to really go into the components themselves. This is really more about the diagram. So there's lots of documentation about these components. There's lots of content that you can get in the for videos that are introducing this, and of course, like I said, the documentation. But the real reason for this was when you build these services, these components interact with each other, and you end up having to do these kind of diagrams, or at least this is what I've been doing a lot when I'm building different apps using the SDK. Is I'll have these, I'll come up with some kind of design and then maybe create some kind of a diagram for it. And of course, if you're manually creating it without any kind of tool, you know how dynamic software is, and things start changing, and you have to start erasing your changes and so on. So anyways, this diagram here, this isn't a design diagram of a service. It's just kind of an example of it, like an interaction diagram showing the components in the diagram. So I'm showing things like endpoints, things coming in from HTTP or gRPC. Endpoints communicate with entities or workflows or views. These entities maybe emit events that get picked up by consumers, and the events gets transformed into commands that go to other entities, and that you have these event streams that are flowing through the system. Very powerful pattern, by the way. I love that pattern. I find it very, very useful in building things. But there's all these different interactions that are going on. So this really was the motivation for wanting to have a more dynamic tool that would take all this and it's like scan my code. All this information is in the metacode, in the code of the application. Let's distill that out into something useful like a diagram like this. So the way this works is that there's a extension. I've already installed it here. It's pretty straightforward. This extension is not in the marketplace. I don't know if it ever will be, but it's no problem because you can just install it using the VSIX files that are provided with this repo. And so with VS Code, it's pretty easy to install these VSIX files. You just go into the extensions panel and then go down and say install, and then you can get these VSIX files from the repo. You can either just check out the repo or just copy the files down to your local system and then install it. So it's really simple to install. And then once you've installed it, you've got the the extension here, and it has some of the documentation. This is the README from the repo. So that's it. And then what you do is you can create a diagram. So you can pick anywhere, but normally you just kind of go to the root folder of where your application code is at, which in this case is this folder here. And on the File Explorer, there's a pop-up menu, and the top item says Akka Generate Component Diagram. And you just right-click that, and it scans all the source files looking for components. And it found a bunch of components. Now, initially, the diagram is just kind of all bunched up here, and you have to manually move things around. I'll come back to this and show you how that's done, but I want to show you a couple examples of other projects where I've already moved things around. So here's a fairly straightforward project that I got set up, and you can see that it was all clumped up in the top left, and I just started moving things around. Normally I put the endpoints on the left, the entities and maybe consumers in the middle, and views kind of on the right. It doesn't always work out that way. I'll show you something more complicated in a second. But what you can do then, you just drag things around. You can drag individual units around, or you can shift and drag and grab a group of these things. You can grab as many as you want and kind of move groups around, that type of thing. So you just manually move them around. You can't add, this is kind of a passive diagram because it's the result of a scan. So say I added another component into this project and did another scan, that component would just by default pop up here in the top left, and I'd have to, or you'd have to drag it somewhere into your design diagram to where it makes some sense. I'll show you a more complicated diagram, and this is really where I wanted this kind of a diagram. So this is a project that I've been working on. It's still a work in process, but you can see it's a much more involved type of application. And there's a lot more components involved here, and you can see there's kind of flows going on. There's an endpoint here, and you can also pan and zoom. I can zoom things around or pan things around, and I can zoom in and look, get a close up of different things that are here. Also, there's the ability to, if you click on one of the components in the diagram, it opens up the associated source file for that component. So if I want to look at the endpoint, I click on that, it brings up the endpoint. If I want to look at the consumer, I click on that, it brings up the consumer, and so on. So it's just a quick way to kind of navigate through your code. And then, of course, you can, like I say, you pan and zoom around. The reason for being able to zoom in and zoom out is that these diagrams can get potentially quite large and maybe spread out in horizontally or vertically, things like that. I'm going to go back to the other project real quick here, because this one, you can see here that these lines, there's a label, and if you mouse over the label, it gives you a kind of a clue as to what methods of the service, or the downstream service, are being invoked. So this this grid cell endpoint is calling these things like create shape, update shape, and so on of this grid cell entity. And you can see here, this is just an event going out to a view. Here's a query coming from a consumer to a view, and you can see different things like that. So that's how this works, and so it's pretty straightforward. So if I go back to that other project here, normally, like I say, I just start dragging things out. I look for the entities and then the consumers and kind of see where they're connected, workflows, things like that. Another consumer and a view. So let's see, how does this thing shape up? So you can see that there's an interesting flow here where the endpoint is it's making some calls to this entity. It's making some calls to this view. It's making some calls to this another entity, and it's making a call to the workflow. So you move things around the way you want, where it makes some sense to you as far as to give you an idea of how this thing works. And then when you want to look at the code, you just click into one of these things and take a look at the code. And if you want to rescan the diagram, you just go back and you rescan it again, and that's it. So like I said, this is brand new. I just got it working. It's, by the way, it's totally vibe coded. I counted the number of iterations or prompts, and I used Gemini 2.5. I didn't do it through an IDE, and it was about 80 prompts, 80 iterations to get this thing working to the point that it's working. And this is my first attempt to do a VS Code extension. Didn't write a line of code. Didn't even look at the code. It's all TypeScript that was generated by the by Gemini. In any case, that was a fun thing to do. But finally, with AI, can start doing these kinds of things. I think that the nice thing is the gap between what you can dream and what you can implement is closing because of the power of some of these tools that we have now. So I hope this is of interest. Again, the GitHub repo link is in the description of the video. Keep learning. Please like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you in other videos.